I've gotten 25 subscribers in the last like 5 days.
No, but how many viewers?
I get like 100. I got like 100 once.
On average,
On average, like 20.
people actually watch it. Read a book.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. All right, here we are. Stalin's Closed System of Colossus by Abe Zucca, Part 8. You can check out my art at zuccagallery.com. You can Google my name, Abe Zucca, and see what comes up. And if you happen to be in Phoenix, you can check out my gallery in downtown, 1301 Grand. This is the final section, the final reading of Stalin's Closed System of Colossus. After this reading, I will begin a whole new series called Fractal Islam. Let me know if you have any questions. Like and subscribe. Let's begin. The Stalinist Art of Living. The total aesthetic governance, avant-garde inheritance, and the politics of the everyday form. The pen has become equal to the bayonet. Art is not a mirror held up to reality, but a hammer with which to shape it. The typical is not what exists, but what must exist. Total aesthetic state. On the decree of 1932, the dissolution of artistic plurality and the unification of life into one project. When the Central Committee decreed a single organization for all artists, architects, writers, and cultural workers, it did not merely abolish the avant-garde. It abolished the very possibility of artistic independence as a category of existence. The liquidation of artistic groups are not an administrative act, but a metaphysical one. The plural became the singular. Culture ceased to be a field and became a command. I'm Abe Zucca. You can check out my art at zuccagallery.com. If you have any questions about Stalin's Closed System of Colossus, please type it in. I'm going to continue reading. This is the last reading of this series. The first 5-year plan was the blueprint for a civilization that no longer differentiated between the factory and the poem, between the novel, between the plan and the plot. The goal of restructuring life required the aestheticization of governance, of everyday policy was staged as a scene in the drama of socialism, every directive a line in the script of the future. The state abolished the boundary between the trivial and the monumental. The arrangement of a worker's dormitory became as significant as the writing of an epic, because both were instruments of life building. The avant-garde betrayed and fulfilled on the strange triumph of the project that also marked its destruction. The avant-garde dreamed of subordinating art to life. Stalin subordinated life to art. Their vision intersected at the moment of totalization, after which the avant-garde found itself redundant. Hi, hello. If you have any questions about the reading, I know I have low subscribers and it seems like this is ridiculous, but bear with me. This channel's only going to grow. The defeat of the avant-garde did not occur through conservative backlash, but through the realization of its own demands by means it could not endorse. State power replaced radical invention. Can I read one about World War II? Possibly. But the next series is going to be Fractal Islam. So you're going to have to wait. It was not the party's authoritarianism, but the avant-garde's own reductionism that made its annihilation easy. By abolishing taste, pluralism, and autonomy, it had prepared the ground for a single aesthetic sovereign. Tell your friends to like and subscribe. Check out my art. I'm a painter and a writer. I'm more known for my paintings. zuccagallery.com, or just put Abe Zucca in Google. The suicide stands as the monument to this paradox. The poet who asked for total fusion of art and life was crushed precisely because his vision was granted. The new aesthetic state did not require novelty, it required obedience to the sovereign form, a unity that the avant-garde demanded conceptually but could not tolerate institutionally. Cultural centralization and the golden mean of power. Please ask questions about anything I'm reading. I'm not really into doing this boring reading thing over and over again. I want to have conversation. I have a lot of subjects ahead that I want to investigate and talk about. So here we go. On Stalin's of artistic authority and the punitive moderation of extremes. Stalin's cultural strategy was not extremist but eliminative. Whatever appeared doctrinally pure was suspect, and whatever posed as neutral was dangerous. He accepted all who accepted his project regardless of their earlier affiliation. He condemned all who insisted on their own identities. No, he condemned all who insisted on their old identities. The past was permitted only as raw material, but not as authority. Those who championed the party line most fervently often perished first, not because they were impure, but because they exceeded the leader's preferred temperature of loyalty. Cultural centralization was not merely a means of ideological control, it was a way of creating a population of interchangeable creators whose work could be measured against the typical. The paradox of Stalinist tolerance is simple. The state welcomed every prior aesthetic as long as it arrived with its head bowed. The classical heritage refunctioned. On the paradoxical rescue of the classics by a system that destroyed their conditions of production. The party preserved classical culture not out of reverence but out of utility. The past was a warehouse of effects to be redeployed in the construction of a future that claimed to end history. The classical canon was not inherited but appropriated. The party seized it as one seizes railroads or land, strategic assets in the struggle to reshape consciousness. Where the avant-garde rejected the classics in the name of novelty, Stalinism embraced them in the name of destiny. Both were motivated by the desire to collapse the distance between art and life. Under Stalinism, realism ceased to denote a historical technique. It became the metaphysics form of the party's will, the visual grammar of a world that claimed to be post-history. The state's use of the classics resembled a secular liturgy. Timeless artworks became symbols of a future that was treated as already accomplished. This is a small group, but as it gets bigger, these beginning moments will be the most memorable for this channel. Realize that you that have been here since the beginning will be acknowledged. I am Abe Zucca. You can check out my art at zuccagallery.com. I am reading right now Stalin's Closed System of Colossus. This is going to be the last reading of an 8-part series. Dream realism and the typical, on the peculiar metaphysics of socialist realism. Socialist realism did not depict the real, it depicted the real as it ought to be, a reality shaped and advanced by a party's objectives. The typical was not the statistical common, but the politically anticipated. It represented the subterranean will of the leadership rendered visible before its fulfillment. To portray the typical was to preempt the future. The artist was required to intuit the next shift in the party line and retroactively install it into the present. Art became a form of anticipatory obedience. Painters and writers produced realities that the state would later claim as fact. The typical was not a description, but a command designed as form. The subconscious engineered on Pavlov, Stanislavski, and the automation of perception and the abolition of the device. Where the avant-garde sought to make strange, Stalinism sought to make habitual. Strangeness was replaced by the anesthesia of repetition. The slogan that once shocked became the background noise of the collective subconscious, functioning as the new grammar of life. Pavlov's conditioned reflexes and Stanislavski's method converged. The state wanted citizens whose conviction and performances fused seamlessly into a single identity. Automation was the highest aesthetic achievement, the moment when art and ideology disappeared into behavior. The Stalinist art of living was essentially an art of making the device visible, a formalism of power rather than of technique. Dialectical radicalization, on the negation of negation and the purge as aesthetic principle. The avant-garde negated tradition, Stalinism negated the negators. This double negation achieved what neither intended, a culture that felt both timeless and suspended. The purge was not merely political but aesthetic, a method of eliminating stylistic and ideological impurities. To achieve the clarity of a single vision, the era's violence was structured like a dialectic. Those who destroyed the old world were destroyed, so that the new world could be purified. The perpetual refinement created a culture in which no one's position was stable, a world without completed forms, only provisional exemplars. The principle was simple and brutal. The more one participated in shaping the new world, the more one risked being excluded from it. Staged reality on photography, painting, theater, and the state as director. In socialist realism, representation was inseparable from staging. Reality was arranged before it was depicted. The painter became a photographer of prescripted facts. The photographer became a set designer of the party's imagination. The entire country became a theater in which each citizen performed a role written elsewhere. Art merely reproduced the scene. The measure of artistic talent was the ability to fuse one's own imagination with the state's, to become indistinguishable from its objectives. To paint reality was to paint the leadership's dream of reality. The canvas was a screen onto which the future projected itself. Let me know if you have any questions. This is going to be the last reading of Stalin's Closed System of Colossus. After this, I will begin my series on fractal Islam. Check out my art at zuccagallery.com. The new individual on the engineered subject of the Stalinist world. The goal of the Stalinist aesthetic was not to produce artworks, but to produce a person, the citizen whose inner life matched the external directives. To live under Stalinism was to inhabit an artwork whose author was the state. Life itself became a genre, and the individual its medium. The new person was defined not by agency, but by alignment. Their desires, thoughts, and perceptions were shaped to harmonize with the party's objectives. Selfhood became a function of participation. Deviation, even unintended, became a form of aesthetic dissonance requiring correction. The Stalinist art of living sought to eliminate distance between creator and creation. The subject was both the sculpted material and the sculptor's apprentice. The planned imagination, socialist realism as dream mechanics. To depict life in its revolutionary development is to dream for the masses. The state plans not only production, but perception. The command economy of imagination assigns quotas to dreams, regulates the permissible forms of hope, and establishes the official syntax in which the future may be pictured. Socialist realism is less style than a technology of prefiguration. In function, it is not to mirror events, but to prototype them, producing images that the population will later inhabit. The imagination becomes the first 5-year plan. And before a tractor factory is built, there must be a novel about the tractor factory. Before a collective farm exists, a mural must reveal its success. Let me know if you have any questions about Stalin's Closed System of Colossus. Like and subscribe. Check out my art at zuccagallery.com. Before a tractor factory is built, there must be a novel about the tractor factory. Before a collective farm exists, a mural must reveal its success. Dream mechanics replaces aesthetics. The artist becomes a technician of the possible, selecting, shaping, and optimizing images whose credibility functions as social adhesive. The socialist realist image is a directive, not a depiction. It instructs the viewer. This is the future you must learn to see. Every painting is a political forecast encoded as narrative. The radiant harvest, the cheerful miner, the tireless brigade. These are predictive fictions that seek to materialize themselves through constant circulation. Under planned imagination, emotional life is scheduled. The state establishes the appropriate moment for exultation, vigilance, mourning, and triumph. Dream mechanics turn desire into infrastructure. Hope becomes a public utility. Enthusiasm becomes a grid. Belief becomes a form of energy distribution. Socialist realism is the psycho-techniques of consent. It creates citizens who can visualize the party's objective more vividly than their own needs. The imagination must be disciplined because it is dangerous. An uncontrolled dream may contradict the plan, therefore all visions must enter the same channel like water gathered into a hydroelectric dam. The cultural apparatus, intuitions, unions, and managements of form, we organize productions, we organize consciousness. The cultural apparatus is the nervous system of the aesthetic state. Unions, committees, editorial boards, juries, and ministries serve as synapses through which directives move and aesthetic reflexes are conditioned. Centralization transforms form into a commodity of governance. Genres become administrative categories, styles become disciplinary procedures, publication schedules become instruments of political timing. The union of writers is a moral police force disguised as professional associations. Membership functions simultaneously as privilege, surveillance, and guarantee of ideological alignment. Committees distribute survival. To be published, exhibited, or staged is not only an artistic event, but an ontological one. An affirmation that the creator continues to exist in the political world. Cultural institutions do not arbitrate taste, they fabricate it. They define which emotional responses are socially useful and which are destabilizing. Apparat criticism replaces criticism. Evaluations of form are indistinguishable from evaluations of loyalty. Ambiguity in style becomes ambiguity in allegiance. The apparatus administers temporality. It determines what counts as timely, delayed, premature, or dangerously ahead of schedule. Cultural unions can reconfigure the economy of risk. A misplaced metaphor may be more hazardous than a factory accident. The apparatus does not suppress plurality, it preemptively reduces it. By defining the permissible grammar of creativity, it ensures that deviation appears improbable before it is attempted. Institutions collectivize imagination. They ensure that every artistic gesture reflects not the self, but the apparatus image of the self. The Soviet everyday, kitchens, dormitories, clothing, cues, interiors, everyday life is the first and last school of socialism. The Soviet everyday is an aesthetic installation disguised as a necessity. Scarcity, routine, and communal living are not only outcomes of policy, but techniques of subject formation. The kitchen is the primary political cell of the nation. It is where loyalty is whispered, discontent murmured, and survival strategies exchanged. The only room where the private coexists with the collective. The dormitories dissolve individuality into proximity. Beds become administrative devices, privacy becomes an unofficial currency, intimacy becomes a shared infrastructure. Clothing is a form of ideological punctuation. Uniformity is not accidental poverty, but intended coherence. Garments teach the body to move within the narrow corridors of permissible expression. Cues are national rituals of patience and collective endurance. Waiting becomes a pedagogical device, teaching citizens how to conceptualize time as a political force. Interiors are manuals of conduct. The placement of portraits, radios, calendars, and household objects create an environment where ideology is materialized into habit. The everyday is a training ground for emotional calibration. One learns to feel with moderation, to hope with caution, to speak with modulation. Scarcity does not only constrain, it organizes. The struggle for access becomes the grammar of social interaction. The Soviet everyday is saturated with encoded instruction. How one enters a shop, addresses a superior, stands in line, or shares a cigarette is guided by tacit rules that bind the subject to the political whole. The everyday is where the Stalinist art of living achieves its totality, not through spectacle or ceremony, but through repetition and bodily memory. And so we will end with that, not through spectacle or ceremony, but through repetition and bodily memory is the Stalinist art of living conducted. That is the end of Stalinist Closed System of Colossus. That's the end of the reading. Please subscribe. Check out my art at zuccagallery.com. Google the name Abe Zucca. See what you find. And if you happen to be in downtown Phoenix, you can check out my gallery at 1301 Grand Avenue. I'll see you guys later.